Okay, hi everyone. I'm Sarah, and I'd like to welcome you to our speaker series of CS+Social Good by BAYCSC. We are a team of high schoolers who advocate for CS education and accessibility across the US. If you're interested in joining us or in participating in more of our events, our social media and contact information is going to be included in the presentation. And I would like to remind all of you guys that we are recording today's speaker, which is David Lee.
Yeah, so before we get into it, I'm going to give a quick bio of who he is. And so he received his PhD from Stanford University, where he was part of the Social Algorithms Lab. He also received his BS from Caltech, where he was part of the Molecular Programming Project. And his research centers around integrating design, algorithms, and incentives to develop novel ways for integrating experimental, passion-driven learning with supporting governments and nonprofits in organizing community members towards addressing complex societal issues. And his work has received paper awards at numerous conferences, and he currently assistant professor of computational media at UC Santa Cruz, where he directs the Tech for Good lab. So with that, David's going to give a presentation and introduce an activity, as well as we're going to open it to Q&A session. So if you have any questions, make sure to keep those in mind, and you can definitely get those asked at the end. So now we can turn it over to David, and yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for inviting me. Let me quickly share my screen. Let's see here. And let me try to drag just a second. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again for inviting me. And it's cool to be here. I grew up in the Bay Area. I went to Saratoga High, and I've kind of been in California all my life. So NorCal, and then went to Caltech, and then came back. So really love California and love the Bay. Today, what I was thinking of talking about is giving some of the research perspective, I guess, on CS and social good, computing for society, and about some of the different types of projects in different disciplines that people are working on in relation to CS for social good. The general outline of my talk is I'm gonna do a really short overview of social computing, kind of just the motivation background. Social computing is the area of research that I do work in, and I think it's a space where you naturally talk about computing in society, and then I'll talk a little bit about my journey and some projects I've worked on. And I just like projects that illustrate different types of work and different types of methods, just so that you see that there's a lot of different things out there. And one of the goals of the talk is to have you appreciate and get a sense of all the different things that you might explore yourself when you go to college or even now. And then what I'm planning on doing for the exercise is doing just a really small taste of need finding, or some of the, let's say, the principles behind need finding. I think that a lot of times when people think of CS, they primarily are thinking of programming, coding, and I think a really big part of especially CS for society and social good is to really be able to understand users and understand their needs and think about design. And so that's part of my own journey, is kind of discovering that. And then I'm gonna just talk about it a little bit in that exercise portion. Cool, and let me just watch the time. I kind of packed this talk, so I wanna make sure I move on. Okay. So let's start with social computing. this is a quote from my PhD advisor, actually. And he said, algorithms used to be what made computers run faster. When he was in his PhD, he was working on algorithms for distributed systems, and the entire focus is like, how do you help, how do you design algorithms that make things faster for tools that people are using? But now, algorithms aren't just making computers faster and working with providing tools for individuals. They're really creating social and economic systems. And in social computing, this term first was coined with social media, social networks, online communities. It traditionally has referred to these online spaces, social spaces. But now it's evolving and changing to a lot more. If you think about some of the changes that have happened in the last, I don't know, decade, 5 years, I don't know. Now there's obviously the internet and social networks make it really easy to access information, really easy to interact with people. There's IoT and your devices, your smartphones that make it really easy to have an interface between you and the digital world, and also an interface from which algorithms and software and digital world can tap into you through push notifications and things like that. And then you have the cloud and the API economy, which is making it really easy to develop new apps, new products, new technologies, and kind of insert it into this this network, this information and social network. And so, what I feel is happening is, you have your social network, people are networked together with devices, and you have all these innovations that and different digital technologies that are coming in, and not just being tools for individuals, but really playing a role of relationships that we have, and in our economic systems, in our communities, in our political systems. So that's really what social computing is about. It's no longer just studying technical systems, but it's systems where there's both a computational component and also a social, a human interaction component. And you're trying to understand these, we call them socio-technical systems. So systems where the behavior is not just based on the technical aspects, but also the social aspects of that system. So that's what I'm interested in, and I'm interested in understanding how technology can play a positive role in that. And I think that there's obviously a lot of disruption that's happening, and in that rapid change, in all the rapid change that's happening, it can be really harmful for people. And so I'm interested in how do we think about not just these social networks like Facebook or Twitter, but how do we think of computing as supporting some of the systems we don't usually think of as computing systems, our systems of education and work and community engagement and governance. Like, what role does computing have in those, and can it play a positive role? So I'm gonna now jump into talking about some of my own journey and projects, and I just am gonna sample really small number of things, but it's also given the time constraints, I'm choosing 3 different projects instead of focusing on one. So my goal here, I decided instead of diving deep into one project, I really wanted to give you a taste of different types of work that's happening and the different methods that people are using. So my journey, I drew this diagram just to convey that my journey was chaotic. and it was chaotic before. So this diagram is just for my PhD. So I started off doing more mathematical work in modeling and algorithms and econ CS and AI. At some point during my PhD, and I'm sure all of you guys are gonna encounter this sometime during college or if you go to grad school, I was like, what am I doing with my life? And is what I'm doing useful? And yeah, so I started feeling that my research wasn't very useful practically. And so I spent a bunch of time towards the end of my PhD just exploring different things, exploring entrepreneurship as a way to make more practical impact, exploring then design, political science, and just kind of lost and wandering around exploring things. And that kind of is what brought me to, at the end of that journey, to where I am now with the lab that I've started at UC Santa Cruz, Tech for Good Lab, and trying to find ways to bridge these different perspectives together towards both doing research of generating new interesting knowledge and also doing practical, building practical things that can actually support communities. One of the things I wanted to actually emphasize with this slide is, you guys are all high school students and thinking about, maybe thinking about what major in college and things like that. Don't feel a need to have everything planned out because things are going to change. And I think it's good to have a plan, but also be open and curious to different things out there, and recognize it's going to change. Actually, in college, I was not thinking about any of this stuff at all. I didn't actually. I was kind of working electrical engineering and then biologically inspired computation when I went into grad school. So all sorts of different things before I actually came down this path, and that's how life is. So definitely embrace that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 projects now. The first project is more of a modeling project. So think of economics type projects or sociology, things where people are trying to model societal systems, and you can't completely engineer them, right? And so you're often trying to elicit some certain principles that can give you insights about how to design things. And what we were interested in is this question of polarization. Does it exist? And if so, why does it exist? Why is it increasing? Why does it feel like people are becoming more polarized? And what do our models say about that? A lot of people say that social networks play a role in polarization because you have echo chambers. People are connected to people who are similar to them. They call that homophily. So a homophilous network is something where you are connected to other people who are similar than you. And so the question is, what is the role of social networks in polarization and homophily in polarization? And can we usually in modeling, what you're trying to do is you're trying to have a simple model. You're trying to find, create a mathematical model with a small number of parameters, of key parameters, to that are able to predict or handle or support analysis of more complex behavior. And if you're able to do that, hopefully that model can also be used in actually analyzing things and building algorithms. So this is what's called a 2-island network. It's a way of modeling homophily, which is to say that you have 2 groups of people, and and they're kind of, you can think of, let's say they're liberal and conservative, right? So liberal leaning, conservative leaning, and in a homophilous network, people who are more conservative leaning have more ties to other people who are conservative leaning. People who are liberal leaning have more ties to people who are liberal leaning. And so that's kind of captured by this network of connections between people, and where well, p diff and p same are just what fraction of what probability are you connected with someone from a different ideology, let's say. And I'm not going to go into the details, like I said, but in opinion formation models, people try to do things like, hey, let's say that people have opinions that range from 0 to 1, that kind of represents how strongly they feel on one extreme or the other around some topic. And there's some model for how they incorporate the opinions of the people around them and update their opinion over time. And existing models basically couldn't really account for polarization. So that's kind of what we were trying to understand. And one of the so what we did is we looked at some work in social psychology on something called bias assimilation. There's an interesting study of people who read a neutral article, kind of a middle of the ground article on, let's say, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and you might ask the question, does a middle of the ground article bring people closer together? You would think that it might, but actually, people end up becoming farther apart after reading that middle of the ground article. And the reason for that is because when you are reading an article, you kind of filter out the things that confirm your opinion. So you're like, oh, if this confirms my opinion, I'm like, oh yeah, of course that's true. But things that are opposed to your opinion, you're going to be more critical of. And so you're going to say, like, is that really true? You're going to think more critically about it. And the end, the conclusion you're getting from it is actually polarized, or it's kind of more biased towards what you were ranking. So we found a simple way to kind of incorporate this into existing models of opinion formation dynamics. And then we were able to use that to analyze and show that in very simple settings we can kind of understand how bias affects different types of behavior, like consensus or polarization or persistent disagreement. And then also to show that actually, if you just have homophily, you won't necessarily have polarization, but it's actually homophily when you also have bias that polarizes society. And we had, so this type of work is, as you can tell, it's a modeling type of project. And from it, you can, we followed it up to talk about the role of recommender systems. When I was working on this, at that time, I didn't really appreciate, honestly, this kind of economic, high level insight. Because I was like, well, this is still so abstract. And like, how does that really connect to trying to solve the problem of polarization in society and decision making? I'm going to talk about two other types of projects that are they're less social scientific, more engineering. And so this next project is still related to the high level theme of, let's say, decision making in society, but it's less so about opinion formation and more about collaboration and this topic of participatory democracy. And there's a lot of governments who are interested in engaging their citizens more in identifying issues in their community, voting on different ways of addressing those, even making decisions on how to allocate budgets. And so there's actually a lot of this already happening. So cities have actually said, hey, here's $1 million this year that the people decide how to use. And there'll be some process in which people brainstorm ideas, they develop out proposals with government agencies, and then people vote, and they fund winning projects. There's also been projects around like crowdsourcing law reform. There's been stuff, and so we worked on participatory budgeting and stuff with Finland back during my PhD. There's stuff that is going, really interesting stuff that's going on in Taiwan around involving people in resolving really complex policy issues. And for the scope of our project, what we were interested in is how does it work logistically with thousands or millions of people and ideas. Like, how do you even, like, let's say someone were to submit, ideas, and you wanted to look through all the ideas and figure out, which ones you like the most. I mean, how do you even do that? And, if you want to then find what the top ideas are, if you want to actually have people vote on it, how would that work? And so what we were interested in is, could you design algorithms that could, let's say, instead of asking someone to rank all of these ideas, it would help them discover, it would help them just take a look at 2 different ideas and say, hey, out of these 2 ideas, which one do you like better? And then based on that, it would then ask you another set of comparisons and another set of comparisons. And is it possible to use that small building block of a pairwise comparison and still figure out like what the top ideas are if everyone had ranked all the ideas? And there's a bunch of related questions around this, like how about not just for voting, but for actual deliberation? Like how do you facilitate that kind of conversation? So we worked on this voting problem on some things related to small group decision making, and basically there are ways where you can design randomized algorithms to enable kind of efficient discovery of information and ranking. They call it preference elicitation. You can kind of elicit the preferences efficiently with a small number of comparisons per person. And there's all sorts of other projects that aren't related to kind of ranking. For example, in Taiwan, one of the interesting things that I think is really useful is helping large numbers of people identify what are the areas of consensus. So actually, not just voting, but like, hey, we have people have really different opinions on whether Uber should be allowed in Taiwan. So how do we find common ground on that? And so they had a system where people would propose statements, and other people would vote on those statements. But it's not like kind of comparing the ideas. It's more like, do I agree with this, or do I disagree, or do I just want to pass? And again, using these, eliciting these preferences one at a time, they can create a visualization where they can see, here are clusters of opinions. Like, here's a group of people. Okay, we're starting to see there's a cluster of people who feel strongly about this, and this is kind of the representative thought in this group. Here's another one. And what they can do is actually identify statements that everyone can come to agreement on. So actually, in the literature on polarization, even though you see a lot of polarization in society, there's often, usually, a lot of agreement in the underlying values or the underlying like at some low level, there's agreement in the end goals and values, but how those translate to practice are then filtered through different different views and philosophies that then are opposing. But there's often agreement at the core, and so this system kind of allows you to find those common areas of agreement as well as disagreement. And then what they'll do is they'll bring together people representing those different sides, have a conversation about it, and then use that to inform policy making. So there's a lot of really interesting work that's happening there. So I give example of a kind of more modeling project. I give example of of the role of algorithms in processing like large amounts of information or people interactions. My final project that I'm going to talk about is more of a design related project. So what I mean by design is, in modeling, what you're trying to do is you're trying to identify simple models and parameters that can understand complex emergent phenomena. In algorithms, you're often using models, and then what you're trying to do is to achieve goals efficiently or with high quality, and oftentimes related to large amounts of information or scale or incentive properties. But usually you're working with an existing model or form of interaction. In design, what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand what the unique needs of people are, and needs aren't just kind of the obvious need. Needs are embedded in a complex set of motivations and behaviors and environments, and like kind of you want to understand in design that rich picture of a need, and then you want to imagine new forms of interfaces or new forms of interaction that might be able to meet those needs better than the current systems. So the project that I worked on here that I was interested in is this question of how do you scale apprenticeship learning. A lot of times, we have the whole MOOC revolution where, it's a lot easier now for people to access high quality content, course content, from all sorts of institutions and on all sorts of topics, and that's really helping education. But it's focused only on a thin slice of education, right? A lot of education, a lot of learning is not learning that someone can tell you and you'll just get. A lot of learning is experiential. There's a lot of tacit knowledge. In other words, knowledge that is hard to kind of describe. It's kind of built over intuition. And usually that kind of knowledge, you get it by working on things and by having mentorship from, like through an internship or through a manager or through some kind of coach. And that type of opportunity is still really, really hard to scale. Like there's no such thing as like, oh, I have a free weekend, I'm going to do a 1 day or a couple hour internship, and actually have these internships like lead to knowing how to develop web applications. So, we wanted to ask, how do you solve that problem? How do you scale it? And we did a bunch of different things that didn't work. What we ended up working on was a system where instead of having like these topical kind of course modules, like usually in MOOCs, you have these topics, right? You kind of go through lectures. We wanted to have something where you're going through a series of roles. So it's like first you have this simple role, then you have this other role, and each of these roles are small, but you're doing something real. And these roles, so what we did is we defined these for learning web development, and you have these small micro roles that you're working on. And the micro roles, they create this learning pathway, but they're also coming from this kind of hierarchy, like kind of like a project hierarchy. So when you're moving up, when you're moving through this pathway, you're actually, mentoring and managing other people who are coming after you in the pathway. And there's like kind of connections between the later roles and the earlier roles. And so this is kind of a project we worked on, and we were able to, we did a kind of a pilot version of it, a really simple thing, but it was really exciting because we were actually able to have people who had no experience in designing web applications, and have them kind of work through these roles and actually help build out just some simple static pages of a web app for nonprofits. So that was really cool, and we're trying to build it out to something that's actually useful for more complex things. It's called Causeway, and the idea is kind of to enable people to learn real world skills while also, as you're learning, you're also automatically supporting real projects. Cool. Okay, so that is a sample of 3 different projects that I worked on using very different types of methods. There are many more projects of very different types also that I didn't cover. So for example, we're working on a qualitative project, more of a user research project, where we're trying to understand for crowd workers, like there's this new world of online labor markets. And we want to understand, what does career development look like for workers in online labor markets, and how, and well, most people know there is no career development in online labor markets. And so the question is, why? Like, why is it that they aren't able to? And what does what would it look like? Like, what are the problems, the underlying problems that are keeping that from happening, and what needs to happen, what needs to change in these platforms to enable it? So that kind of project is kind of more interviewing people, then analyzing using social scientific methods to analyze and understand the complex set of needs, and then kind of describe a theory around that topic. Yeah, okay, so let's go to the need finding exercise. Maybe one last thing I'll just say is, when I was entering college, I was one of those like math nerds that was like, oh, everything useful, is related to math, and not appreciating as much of, let's say biology or social sciences. And it's like completely the opposite view now, where especially if you want to do things related to computing for society or social good, you need tools like, mathematical knowledge or algorithms, or being able to design and develop applications. But what's really, really important is being able to understand the complexity of human behavior and needs, and being able to understand those needs, and being able to understand how different types of social scientific theories are informing the needs. All those things are really, really important before you even get started on designing and developing algorithms or things like that. So I think it's really important to have that open mind. That's the reason why I wanted to show you different types of projects. This exercise is kind of following up on that theme of the importance of understanding needs. This is actually an exercise from Michael Bernstein, his HCI class. Michael Bernstein is a professor at Stanford and one of my mentors. This is one of the exercises he does just in an intro to HCI class. A little bit of context. When you're designing a product, it's not, you don't just say, here are all the things I need to build and I'm just going to build it and deploy it. There's a whole design process. You are iterating around a hypothesis you have about the problem and a hypothesis of the solution that you have. We call them prototypes. They're small things that you build just to be able to answer a question you have about the problem. And in user-centered design, what you're trying to do is you're trying to have a really, develop a really rich understanding of the problem that users face. And you're trying to, there's only so much you can do to understand it just by observing, interviewing. And so what you need to do is then have a really tight cycle of having a hypothesis, brainstorming how you might test those hypotheses, prototyping it, and repeating. And actually, there's a lot of relationships to entrepreneurship too, where you need to figure out what's the right product that really nails the needs that people have. And I mentioned this earlier, but one of the important concepts is that needs are embedded in a rich, complex context. And they arise from a detailed set of behaviors, attitudes, goals, intents that characterize people in a particular environment. And so discovering that is the challenge. And in need finding, there's a lot of practices around observation, around interviewing, around usability studies that are all aimed at eliciting this, this understanding. And the biggest challenge in doing need finding is actually going below the surface and not just describing the simple, obvious things, but not just recommending like small local tweaks, but really going deeper. What I wanted to do is, let's see, can I actually see people? Let me turn on, let's see, I can't find my mouse. There we go. So what I want to do is, if people could turn on their video, just so I can see people. And what I want you guys to tell me is, what are the needs in this picture?
Height.
Height, okay.
Well,
Vision.
Vision. Can you tell me more? What do you mean by this?
She's looking for something. If she can see it from where she's standing, it solves half the problem.
Yeah, okay. So height is like kind of reaching the top. Vision is being able to identify things.
Getting the blue colored beverage.
Getting the blue covered beverage. Great.
To add on to that, she's kind of going to like the back of it rather than just like the front blue drinks. So I guess she wants the back ones. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so she's trying to get into the back. Cool. Some people went, so I think, okay, great. One of the first things when you're talking about needs is that needs are verbs and not nouns. And I think that, you guys did a decent job here. I think a lot of times people will say she needs a ladder. Very common, like very common when I ask this question, she needs. And whenever you say something like that, you're assuming a solution. And so you want to, the first step in kind of opening up your mind is trying to understand what are the verbs that she's trying to do. And I think some people mentioned, she's trying to get something in the back, right? Let's
let's just take that one perspective and say, okay, what are the needs that she has? This time focusing on verbs. Is there anything else people want to add? We can also keep going. Okay, so she needs to get something in the back. This is kind of what people are hearing, are saying, are seeing. One of the really big things that people do when they're need finding is that they're mixing up what they see with the interpretation. They're mixing up observation with interpretation. And let's see, actually, I can't. I'm trying to move. I'm trying to see both you guys and my slides at the same time. But okay, I can't see my mouse. That's okay. And one of the simple things to do is to separate the what with the how and then the why. So start from what you see. So okay, first, just list all the things you're seeing. What's the environment and activity? What's out of frame that might be important? So obviously there's like the immediate things, right? But then there's also the peripheral things. And just start with observations. And then move from what you're seeing to how. Like, how are people doing things? And why are people doing things in the way that they're doing it? And then to move, when you start from that and then you move towards interpretation, then you can start asking, why are you seeing what you're seeing? And what are the needs that those observations are telling you? So let's go back here. Let's just start from what. Okay, so what are all the things people see in this picture that are going on? What are the things that that describe the environment? What's out of frame? Whatever you want. Go ahead and shout out obvious things too, because in what you're starting from the really obvious things also, but just everything. You want to be comprehensive.
Energy drinks.
Okay, so you're seeing energy drinks.
She's in the sports drink aisle. There's Gatorade and Powerade.
Okay, sports drink aisle. There's Gatorade and Powerade.
She is stepping on a shopping cart with a bunch of stuff in it, and she is also like tiptoeing.
Yeah, okay, she's stepping in a shopping cart. That's interesting. And she's tiptoeing. Why do you think she's stepping in a shopping cart?
So she can reach the items on the top shelf.
So she can reach the items on the top shelf, okay? Any other observations of what or how or why? Any other interpretations for why she's stepping in a shopping cart? Do you guys step in shopping carts to reach
Normally
things in the top aisle?
Climb, or I get someone to help me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, something that's bothering me, and has been bothering me this whole time, is the person isn't holding the shopping cart. They purposely walked away to take a photo.
That's interesting, right? So that's kind of out of frame. So that's, what is out of frame? Someone's taking a photo. Do you usually do that, right? Like when you're when you're trying to reach something on top shelf. So yeah, I think that's exactly what we're trying to ask. When you start to observe things and you ask like, how are they doing things? Okay, they're trying to reach something on top. How are they doing? They're stepping in a cart and someone's taking a photo, right? So like, what's going on? And when you start doing that, you start to go beyond just the surface level obvious needs that you see in the situation to developing a model of who the person is. What are the things what are their thoughts and their feelings right now? Like if you're looking at this picture, right? And we talked about the things we saw and how and why. What do you think she's feeling right now or thinking?
I mean, from what I can tell, she's kind of laughing, so she's like laughing at the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
so kind
I would assume the person reaching out to it and also the person taking picture would be laughing.
yeah, right? So you kind of start seeing that maybe this picture isn't so much talking about reaching something on the top shelf as much as a feeling of independence, right? Of kind of making fun of the situation of being short. Maybe it's like finding lighthearted ways to um, to to um, to communicate that, right? So you start having a really different picture of what's going on, and from that, the needs that you might start seeing in this user segment, or the user segment that this person represents, could be completely different. It could have nothing to do with reaching the top shelf, right? And so that's kind of one of the really core things in need finding, is that in need finding, you are trying to develop a model, a theory, a picture of who the person is, what their environment looks like, right? What their life looks like, what their values are, and so you go from what you're seeing to how they're doing things, why they're doing things, and what are the things they're thinking and feeling that help you develop a picture of what's going on. Let me see what time it is right now. Well, let's do this. I mean, we don't have that many people, so just stick right here. So here's another picture. Just want to spend a little bit doing the same thing here. What are the things you're seeing? How? So start from what, then go to how are people doing the things that you're seeing. Then ask why. So let's just start from what, because you're going to start trying to do the whole thing at once. Just name the whats.
It's a bunch of blood.
Okay, a bunch of people at the ice cream. Great. Anything else?
This is the Rockefeller ice cream, right? Isn't that in New York, or am I forgetting?
Okay, so maybe it's a particular ice rink in New York. I have no idea, so I can't answer that question. But maybe it's, you see something about New York. Anything else? Oh, actually, I guess there's a link at the bottom.
Yeah.
RockefellerIceRink.jpg. Probably is. Any other whats? Again, it's just what. So just the obvious things are fine.
There are a lot of people in the ice rink, and even more people outside watching.
Yeah,
people.
okay. So there's people in the ice rink. There's also people outside watching them.
Yeah, I noticed that there are strings of lights around the trees in the background, so it might be a holiday, like Christmas.
Okay, might be Christmas.
They have like nutcrackers.
There's nutcrackers.
Along
Cool.
stuff.
Okay, how about the hows? Like what are the hows that you're seeing in what people are doing in the ice rink, or what people are doing when they're watching?
Well, I see people are generally skating in a counterclockwise direction, so that's nice.
So kind of like a similar direction.
Yeah, they're being good people, ice skating people.
Okay, good.
People who are like at the edges are holding on.
Okay, yeah.
The more like you go inwards, you kind of see like a different like type of people who are like skating in that section.
Yeah, okay. So you have
leisure skaters and stuff like that.
Yeah, so you have people holding on to the sides, and then you have some people in the middle who aren't.
Based on like how blurry the people are, you can see kind of how fast they're going. Like at the bottom, I think they would be going faster, but it's more blurry.
Different speeds.
Also, since there's a lot of people on the ring and also a lot of people outside of the ring, they're probably waiting in line.
Oh,
a time limit.
Yeah.
There's also the restaurant, like the Sea Grill.
Yeah.
And restaurants around it.
Okay, cool. And anyone want to talk about whys? Like, why do you feel like there's all these people watching? Why do you feel like people are holding on to the sides? Why do you feel like people are holding hands in the middle too? You know, I don't know, whatever you want to talk about.
People on the side probably aren't experienced
Okay.
skaters, and probably like there's people skating while holding onto the ledge,
Yeah.
or they're taking a break, or don't
Yeah.
know how to stop.
And how about the people in the middle? Like they're skating, but some people are also holding hands and.
A lot of them are either like couples or family members. Like they're skating and family.
Okay, friends and family.
Yeah, and combining with the situation of like the holiday patients and stuff, maybe they're celebrating for this holiday, so they came to the mall and like have all of these people like skate together.
Yeah.
And the family.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead. I saw someone else is about to.
Oh, yeah. So like considering it's the Rockefeller Center, there's probably a lot of people outside because they're like tourists and they don't see ice skating rinks in like in an area that often, I would guess. So
Yeah.
they're kind of amazed, so they're looking in.
Yeah.
Or they're considering ice skating too.
Yeah. Cool. So, you know, when you look at this picture, there's all sorts of things that you see. And when you're thinking about needs, you know, someone who's just looking at the surface level, they're probably, you know, just thinking about things related to, you know, winter and ice skating and cold, right? But when you're asking questions about the people on the side and like, why are they, you know, what is this ice rink thing doing? And what are people thinking and feeling, right? As they're like, what are the people holding hands feeling and thinking? What are people holding hands on the side? What are the people watching? And you start to have a different picture of what the needs are here, of like creating, you know, maybe it's about creating this like festive, you know, feeling and like very, you know, like, you know, for the people on the side that they something social and interactive. Maybe it's something about how, you know, the ice skating context, because people are slipping and stuff, so they're holding on to each other, they're feeling vulnerable, right? So maybe it's about creating an environment where there's this feeling of vulnerability, right? Where it's kind of, you're creating this like social environment of, you know, dependence on each other or something, right? Of silliness or, so, you know, there's all sorts of different things that you might get from this that have nothing to do with ice skating. And that's what you want to be doing in need finding, is really trying to get a picture of people and their feelings and thoughts. And from that, be able to see like, hey, what are the interesting opportunities or needs or things that might come from the things I'm observing just in my life that might be interesting. Cool. Okay, so that's my my talk and little exercise. We are at 11 already, but I'm happy to answer any questions from people. Right now, I run the Technical Lab, and I work on social computing, trying to cross different disciplines and trying to do projects that are not just doing research, but also connected to the community. It's still kind of early in my process of trying to reach this vision, but thank you for letting me share a little bit about what I've been thinking
thank
about.
you very much, David, for being here today. You provided a really great talk, and it was really informative. And I would like to thank everyone else here as well for coming to this event. Once again, we are the Bay Area Youth Computer Science Council. We hosted this event, and if you're interested in our work, future events, or joining us, you can visit our social media handles, which will be posted in the chat. You can also go to our website, And once again, thank you, David, and thank you everyone for coming to this event. We do hope to see you in the future for any events that we will probably hold.
Does anyone have any questions first? You can either type in the chat or verbally say it.
I guess, what do you, what's like, I guess, college majors or like the area of study that you want to go into if you want to do something similar, like using models to like explain societal phenomena?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things. If you are looking at design, kind of user-centered design, things like that, often that lives in computer science departments in a kind of a HCI, which is human-computer interaction. Sometimes there's like more interdisciplinary majors like information studies or that. There's also things like communication, or there's or media studies, things that are more on the theoretical side of like understanding, more on like the social scientific theory and less on the design. And then if you're doing like more algorithmic or things, then that would be in just kind of CS proper.
Okay.
I have a question as well. So in my area, there's a lot of tech labs for studying psych and studying like things for marketing. And for those, they use a lot of Bayesian networks and Bayesian belief networks and like control theory, network theory, and stuff like that. And with a lot of the research you've done, like what forms of statistical analysis, what forms of computing do you think you most often use?
That's a great question. I've been so scattered, honestly, because when I started, so for example, let's say the work that we're doing with Finland, we were using active learning there, randomized algorithms. Really, I like randomness and probability a lot. But then, with the design work that I'm doing, that doesn't have so much of that modeling component. We're mainly just thinking about new types of interfaces or interactions. Now, it's often true that after you work on the design portion, so usually when you're working on the design portion, optimizing things isn't your focus. You're kind of mainly working on the human constraints. But then often after that, you might want to build on it to make it more effective or efficient. For example, like let's say the web development apprenticeship learning platform, right? We might start with just looking at the design components, but then you might want to use NLP or design some chatbots or agents that can support people in support mentorship in the apprenticeship learning process, or like kind of recommender systems, collaborative filtering type stuff for kind of recommending learning content. So I would say that for me, I don't have like my one tool that it's very common in academia that people specialize in a particular tool, and then they kind of use that tool as a hammer to kind of identify other places where they can like hit a nail. For me, I've been, my story has more been, I work on a tool, I'm like, I don't feel like it really solves everything. Try to explore something else. I feel like, and yeah, so kind of that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a question. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself earlier. I'm Supriya. I'm an officer of BAYCSC. And I was wondering, this is like a very generic question, but what's the best piece of advice you can give someone who wants to pursue artificial intelligence? Because it just seems like such a daunting field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, well, it's a big field. Also, I think these days everyone calls what they're doing artificial intelligence. So I think the first question I would ask you is, what have you tried so far, and like, what do you feel like is the particular challenge you have? Is it with is it trying to figure out what part of AI to look into? Is it with like finding specific skills? Is it with, yeah, what tell me more about your own goals with AI.
Um, so in the past, I don't know, like I've learned about TensorFlow and stuff like that. Um, and I just think like the skill development part is just really, that's like the part that becomes more like an upward climb, because there's just so much you can learn about AI and you're just not sure, like I don't know, like I just feel like it can be hard sometimes to just acquire all of the skills that you need in order to accomplish a certain goal.
Yeah.
And it takes like a really long time to do that.
Yeah. And what year are you right now?
I'm a rising senior.
Okay, cool. So I think so it sounds like what you're saying is the challenge of the humongous learning curve in machine learning, I guess, is what you're specifically focused on, it sounds like. Are you interested in machine learning specifically or AI broadly?
I
Or
think
you're not sure what the difference is?
I'm interested more in machine learning, and I've worked with it like a little bit in the past.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've also been looking into AI more broadly.
Yeah.
That's also really cool.
Yeah, so I would say, for machine learning, what you want to do in terms of your foundations is, one, be very comfortable working with data and scripting. 90% of machine learning is actually dealing with messy data. 90% of the time, okay, that you're spending in machine learning is looking for data sets and like processing them in the way you need to have them formatted in the right way, and just like wrangling with that messiness. So that's something that, if you work on any kind of data project and you kind of build fluency where you're really comfortable, using Python or whatever it is to manipulate data sets, that will really help you. And then I think that the other thing is having a strong mathematical foundation will also be helpful for understanding the theory. And specifically, you want to have a strong foundation in probability and with linear algebra. So I think those are the two main things that you would see in most forms of machine learning, is it's like some form of linear algebra and optimization, or some form of probability and stochastic processes. So, and then I would say, so that's kind of on the knowledge side of what kind of skills. And then what I would do is, and it's not easy to do, but again, it's the problem with apprenticeship learning, that ideally, if you can find a way to be part of a project with some more experienced mentor, even if you're doing grindings initially, like you're working with the data sets and like it feels like this is so boring, I'm not really learning real machine learning. A lot of times that kind of a lot of times, you want to start, this is the same with research. There's such a big space of research and you're like, where do I start if I'm new in a field? You just want to start with something narrow and go deep in it, and you'll start finding connections to all sorts of other things. And if you are working on something with someone else that's more experienced, they will know how to point you to different things, and you'll learn different best practices, different practical tips for both, actually implementing things and conceptual things. And so that's what I would try doing, is like, if you build that foundation, then when you go to college, you can try to like, I don't know, volunteer in a research lab or something, take a class with a professor in a topic that you're interested in, things like that.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that applied to actually like other questions. Like I wasn't like looking into AI, but like that was definitely helpful to me as well, the research chart and all of that. And I also had a question similar to Sophia's, which is, what's your best advice for us high schoolers?
What's my best advice for high schoolers? That's a great question.
Or I guess like high schoolers interested in CS+Social Good.
Yeah, I think my advice would be kind of like what I said earlier, is to have a broad perspective, and realize that, my sometimes I remember at one point in high school I was like, oh, I'm interested in business, and my parents were like, oh, business is not a major, or it's not like you have to be an expert at something, and then you can use that in business. And interestingly, I would people probably wouldn't say that about CS, because CS is obviously something you can get a job really easily just with CS. But I would say that if you want to do things specifically related to CS and social good, like computing for society, then besides just having the technical skills, you ideally want to have some expertise or focus or passion or something else, some experience, could be personal experience, in some problem domain or some challenge. Like, I don't know, you're really passionate about education, you've tutored a lot, and you have to build that intuition about the complexities of a particular need to really be able to do anything about it. Like, it's very hard to say, I'm gonna go and help, I wanna do something to help homelessness or something, I don't know, and like have never really been involved, volunteering or like having any relationships. It's you will probably be able, it's a different type of thing. You will probably be able to do things with your skills. Now, whether you'll be able to do good things is another question. So yeah, I would just say, like, build up that expertise, but also like find what you are authentically passionate about. Like, think about what your long-term goals are, and try to find the connections between just a skill and like what you want to do with the skill.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that's very important, and I agree with that a lot. And I can see that how it is important. So, yeah. Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, if you have more questions, you can send them in the chat. Also, is it okay if we provide your email in the chat and want to reach out to you after this event?
Oh, there's one more question in the chat. It's from Johnny. He says, what's your opinion on fully automating all cars in the US?
What aspect of that?
I was thinking more on the moral aspect, because while fully automated cars could like decrease traffic accidents and like traffic time wasted, there could also be many jobs lost and stuff like that. So I was just wondering about your opinion on that matter.
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of, well, first of all, I'm not an expert on this, okay? So I haven't like, thought through this in great detail. But what I would say is that there's a lot of aspects to this question. And I would say, in terms of even feasibility, I'm very skeptical of it happening in the short term. Not because it's not possible for like large amounts of things, but for edge cases, and edge cases matter a lot when it's driving. It's going to be almost impossible. So I think that it's more likely for it to be like augmentation, where AI is helping to make it easy, but is assisting. But there still has, in my view, there's likely going to still have to be a driver in the loop for most of this. Now, in terms of the moral aspects, like I think you mentioned job loss, and then I actually, I think that the right, what I'm interested in is finding ways to make it easier for people to transition to different jobs, and for there to be an economy that is more supportive of learning, of, right now it's like very hard because you invest a bunch of time and then like you move into a new field, like, everything's lost. I don't think that I don't view it as morally wrong to create new technologies that support people because now other people are being replaced. But I think that it's a very important issue to think about as people as there are new technologies that are replacing people's jobs. Like, are we doing enough to support people in being able to have a living and to have a meaningful contribution and work? So yeah, that's kind of my view. But I think there's other moral challenges or, kind of just complexities in fully automating things and security issues. If there's hacking into an automated car, I mean, there's just a lot of complexities that make it a really challenging thing to fully automate, in my view.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Anybody have any last questions? No.
On the general advice thing, I'm just pasting in. I gave a TED talk where I try to think about some of the bigger picture questions. So I'm just that might be something that people might find useful.
Interesting.
But yeah.
I'm definitely gonna go watch that.
What was
Yes.
like the process of giving a TED talk? Like, what was it like? Because that's always something really cool to hear.
It is exhausting.
Yeah.
I think that I'm not really a natural speaker. Like, the academic speaking is very different than public speaking. And you have to do a lot more like storytelling and less abstract talking, and be funny, which I'm not really. So I think for me, it just took a lot of time to work on and to think of all the stories and what the message is that I'm trying to get across, who the audience is, and like trying to craft the story on the message. It just took a lot of time. I actually, when I was in grad school, I took classes in a business school on communication and storytelling, so that was helpful, but it's not kind of the natural me. So it was kind of tough. It took a long time to prepare.
Oh yeah, it's cool though.
Relatable. Very relatable. Just on a personal note.
All right. So it is 11:20. So
Always
we're a little
We're always over.
we're always over time. It's okay. But yeah, this would be the time to end the speaker event officially. Thank you to everyone for coming, and especially thank you, Dr. Lee, right?
It's fine. You can just call me David.
Thank you, David, for speaking today about your work. So, as always, our social media handles are screen shared as well as our website. So, feel free to reach out to us on there and stay tuned for updates from us. Yeah, thank you to everyone for coming and have a great rest of the day.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for
you so
inviting me.
much.